All right, everyone, welcome back to Murphy's Law. I am actually ecstatic to have one of my friends, colleagues, and frankly, a little bit almost nervous that I have Tony Kovaleski on my podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Kovaleski is a world-renowned
look at you,
retired reporter, local news reporter. But what's funny about having Tony, this is what he does for a living. So that's when I say I'm nervous. It's really cool to have someone who knows how to be on camera, knows how to talk to the public. But more than that, Tony, I'm honored that you would join me on Murphy's Law.
I'm honored for the invite. Tremendous respect. When you were manager of safety, straight shooter, didn't avoid controversy, owned when something went right, owned when something went wrong.
That's right.
I'm excited to take your questions. Fire away.
I love it. Well, and when I say this is a little bit odd for me, usually Tony's the one with the papers in his hand, ready to just pepper me with questions. And so I'm really excited to be able to dig a little deeper with Tony about his career.
Can I butt in and give you my favorite Murphy moment?
Okay, go ahead. Let's do it.
We're working on an issue with Denver Health and ambulance response. I'm showing you some issues in front of a big screen. And I say to you, a problem, and you look down, dramatic pause, and a big problem, you said, and it was the moment. So yeah,
I love it.
You get it, my friend. So fire away.
I love it. Well, and I'm going to give you all a little bit more context. This was my first hardcore interview with Tony Kovaleski. I had some over the years, but none as kind of as consequential as that interview. And Tony comes in with his team into my office, and I'll never forget my comms director and my executive assistant coming to me. They said, "Murphy, I think he's transforming your office into a studio." Because Tony has his team moving my furniture and putting up lights, and I'm like, oh, this is about to be serious. And they said, "Do you want us to cancel?" I said, "Absolutely not. I'm leaning in."
I love it. And you did.
And it was fun. I mean, and it's funny because oftentimes folks think that the relationship between media and public sector, or just media and anyone, has to be controversial, has to be, at odds. And I have conflict-based. Yeah. I have had the absolute opposite relationship with the media over the years, mainly because there is an understanding that no matter what people come at me with, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be upfront, and I'm going to own if I have to own, and I'm going to also hold the media accountable to report what I said.
Well, and so many people could learn from that, Murphy, because their body language in an interview comes across as they're afraid, that they don't know the issue, and that wasn't you. You every interview I did with you, you owned the interview because of what you just talked about, right? There wasn't anything I could ask you that you couldn't answer.
And Tony, I want to go back to your whole career and talk a little bit about you, but we kind of just jumped in, and I want to say this. It's important that people understand, because I've had a lot of people ask, can you give a class on how you deal with media? And I always start with, instead of just saying, hey, these are the ways you approach them, and I always start with, well, the good news about dealing with media is you don't have to make up the truth. If you just start with the truth and you come at it with humility and you look at a person in the eye and say, this is what happened, and you actually give your own emotions to it, you start there. You can build from where you need to build. But
empathy, honesty.
That's right.
The truth.
And the truth. And then, when you don't know, also admit that. There's been many times in my career where I didn't know how to answer. Right? And so let's back up for a second. Tony, talk us about your career very quickly, like how you got into this thing. I want to talk about some of your most consequential cases. And then just how did you end up being an investigative reporter?
Well, I have to tell you, Murphy, luckiest guy in the world, love the job. And I think it's an insatiable curiosity that started when I was a little boy. I got a snare drum when I was 5 years old, and I hit it, and you know the noise a snare drum makes. And I couldn't figure out how it made that noise. So as a 5-year-old, what Christmas present, a snare drum, I take the drumstick and I pop through the top of the drum, and there's nothing inside. Well, it turns out, as you know, the snare's on the bottom.
Yeah.
But I was curious then, and I found a career where I could constantly feed my curiosity, because every story I do and I did, I start out with kind of a base knowledge, but not a whole lot. And by the time you put something on the air and you're saying somebody did something wrong, you better know everything about it. And I send that script to my legal team, and they're going to ask all those questions. So I must learn, and every story I get to learn something new.
Yeah.
And so it fed my personality well. In college, I actually wanted to be a dentist, but that didn't work out. So
I can't see you being a dentist.
I pivoted. Three semesters in, my advisor, I'll make it quick, I had a 3.82. I was doing everything I could to get a 3.82. Nice. And he said, "Hey, my friend, you're probably not going to get into dental school with a 3.82.
Wow.
And I said,
"That's a pretty good GPA to me."
Well, then what else can I do? And he said, "Well, you can probably teach biology in high school." And that's a great career. It just wasn't kind of the way I was looking to go in life. And so that's when I pivoted, and here I am.
Wow. Wow.
40 plus years. We've won some awards. We've changed some laws.
He said we've won some awards. The other day I got the chance to talk to Tony, and it was virtually, so I saw his office. Ladies and gentlemen, this man has 172 Emmys.
No, not that many, but we've done okay. But
more Emmys that take up an entire bookshelf. So that was pretty cool to see.
The more important thing, and I always said this to my team, we don't do stories to win awards. We do stories to make our community a better place.
Sure.
And that's the biggest payoff for me on the stories, like the ambulance story we did. We changed the way things worked in one of the most important hospitals in our area.
That's right.
And it was because people stood up and said, "This can't continue.
Something is amiss."
Exactly.
And that's a really good kind of segue to, Tony, you have done stories through your career that bring light to situations that a lot of folks like myself in perceived power positions.
No, in power. You were there.
When I say perceived
the buck
power,
stopped at your desk.
Well, the reason I say perceived power, yes, the buck stopped at me. But what I always say was, every time I rose in the ranks in a city, no matter what city I was in, the last one being Denver, I felt like the least power you had. Because you have to depend on everybody under you to do their jobs properly, with grace, with humbleness, and frankly, when it gets to you, that means something's off. And so that's why I say perceived power, because the power to actually enact some of these things only got to me when they were heavy, and you witnessed that. What's cool about your job is your job was to kind of bring some of those things out and make people aware, not just the public aware, but a lot of times make the powerful people, the executive level folks, aware that this is happening under your watch. Tell me that dynamic. I'm sure you've had the gamut of people and their responses. Some people own it, some people pivot, some people run, hide, fight. Talk to me about what you've seen in that with leadership.
Well, setting you up. Stories come to us all the time from sources, from viewers, from just wanting to do boots on the ground digging into public records, right? But deciding on which story we do, that's the most important thing we do. And it's making decisions on stories that can have the greatest impact to ultimately make our community a better place. And as you go through my resume, I think you'll see that the stories I've done have had that impact. The most recent one on the Cherry Creek School District, where dozens of insiders reached out and said, "Hey, can you help us?" Nobody's listening, right? And for weeks, I was on the phone with people who said, "Here's the problem. Here's what needs to be exposed," but they didn't want to go forward and talk on camera about it because they were afraid of retaliation. They were afraid there'd be retaliation against their kids who were in the district. Well, fast forward 4 months later, and we do a story on the 13th of January about the superintendent, and he made a decision not to answer our questions. And we had video. We went to a meeting, and he reached down and grabbed his backpack and went out the back door. Now, imagine the optics of that when I've also said for weeks we've sent text messages and emails requesting an interview with the guy at the top of the school district. Well, that got played several times. And 15 days after that story aired, he decided to resign his $340,000 a year job because he simply refused to answer our questions.
Wow.
And so we're still asking, why did he choose not to answer our questions? We're learning more now, but if he would have gone to the Murphy Robinson School of how to deal with the media, he might still have his job today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think though that it goes to show that there's definitely different types of leaders out there. And, I would encourage anyone when dealing with the media, realize that media personnel are people. And oftentimes when a question is being asked, oftentimes Tony never asked a question he didn't know the answer to, but also, if I didn't know the answer to Tony's questions, I would say, clearly you're going after something that I don't know about. Why don't you give me a heads up on what you're talking about? There was never a time where Tony, and frankly any reporter I talked to, didn't say, well, let me turn off the camera for a second. Let me tell you what we got going on. Yeah. And it helped me be like, okay, now this is interesting. And then he said, well, now cue music. Now we're going to go on camera and talk. That's helpful. But Tony, talk to me about, your secret sauce. And then when I say your secret sauce, I was at your retirement party. Something there showed me the magic of Tony Kovaleski and as an investigative reporter. And what that was, you uncovered so many, hundreds, if not thousands of stories over the years, some having really dramatic endings, some having amazing, some having, career endings. The interesting thing for me was that room was filled up with everyone that not only have you worked with, not just your family, but most importantly, people that you've done stories on, to include myself. And what was interesting about that to me was everyone in that room came there with a level of respect, came there understanding that you had a job to do, but more importantly, feeling like they had an advocate for the truth. Well, how did you do that?
Well, Murphy, I think there are similarities in our personality, right? And I think if I were to say one key to the career and the stories I was able to tell, it was because I built relationships with people, and I was able to be accountable. Every time I did a story with somebody, and maybe it wasn't the best story for them, Mayor Wellington Webb was there.
Yeah, he sure was.
Early in my career, when I started in 2001, I did 3 or 4 pieces that were not very flattering on the mayor. And I said it meant the world to me that he came.
Yeah.
And, he said, I got a short memory, Tony. I don't remember those stories because we had an adversarial relationship. There were other people in that room for my retirement event where we started out in conflict.
Yeah.
But there was a building of mutual respect.
That's
because I said, hey, if I report something that's not accurate or you don't like, call me up.
That's right.
If it's not accurate, I'll change it right away. If you don't like it, I'll at least explain to you the process of what I did. Here's why that was in the story. And I think it's important in life, whether you're an investigative reporter or just dealing with other people. If you want to hold people accountable, you've got to be accountable. I don't get some special privilege or block to stand on that says, well, you can't touch me.
Yeah.
No, I'm a human being too, and accountability goes both ways.
It's excellent. It is a great pivot to one of the things I want to talk to you about is the loss of trust in media from our community. I truly believe that given the totality of circumstances and what people are calling the legacy media today, versus online media and those folks who call themselves media, who some of us don't consider media, that's kind of muddied the water in what true investigative reporting, true reporting is today. And when you look at national pundits who, are more concerned about likes than the truth, all the things that happen today, it really puts guys like you in the crosshairs of, everyone else. Talk to me about, much like in law enforcement, we've had to deal with a trust issue. How are you all now, and I know now you're retired, and so you can say now them, but how have you all dealt with that lack of trust, lack of respect when it comes to you as a reporter?
Well, it's a wonder, and it's probably even more important now, Murphy, than it was before, because there's this thing called AI.
Yeah.
Right? And,
oh, my
and
goodness.
think about how many of us, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or wherever you're picking up your reels, you see something. And right now, the first reaction when you see something is that real or was that AI?
That's right.
Right. And so there's some that are really, you definitely know it's AI, and there's Trump stuff out there or whatever, and it's crazy, and and people are making fun of them, and that's clear. But there's other things that come out, and I hear people talk about, I saw it, but I wasn't sure. I thought it was maybe AI. Those weren't facts, and it was actually real news stories.
That's right.
So trust is critical, and I think it's an avenue for local media and credible media to cash in on, because when you tune into the evening news now, or when you go to a website from one of the local news stations, that's not an AI generated story, it's real. And we're all constantly hungry, and our appetite is huge for what's happening in the world.
That's right.
Especially
every morning I turn on my news
what's going on in the
station.
Middle East and all the developments, or the Nancy Guthrie situation that
That's right.
many of us tuned in for night after night for a while, and that's a very sad position we're in right now, because we still don't know. But
that's right.
We want the truth, and it's important for people to build trust. And you also have a very polarized media, right? I'm a political junkie, and when big stories happen politically, I will go home at night and I'll tune into Fox News and MSNBC, or what is MSN now, and oh my.
Yeah.
They both saw a car crash.
Yes.
But what both of them are telling are so polarly opposite.
That's right.
So you have to ingest. You have to be able to make your own mind up on where is the truth. But gosh darn it, that truth thing is moving all over the place right now, and your point is really valid. And as a journalist, when we have to earn people's trust, you have to be careful you keep it.
That's right. That's right. Well, and it's interesting, as you know, I started a company called SurePass that does authority verification. And often in my career, I saw, you or someone else show up with a media credential, and, you just believe that they were there to do their job, and you let them do their thing. Today, there's a lot of people that call themselves media. And there's a lot of people that show up with, whether it's a credential or just a camera, and they start filming and stuff. How do you verify that you guys are real? What does that even look like?
Well, and your company has got a very interesting concept, and it does need to be addressed. I'll tell you a story that I haven't shared with you before, but early in Denver, I went out to a breaking news story, and I wear suspenders, and so I wasn't wearing my coat. And so I walk up to a crime scene, and crime scene tapes everywhere, and I'm trying to get in. And just because I had suspenders on, and this person didn't know me, they thought I was a detective, and they opened the area and said, "Come on through."
Oh, no.
And I said, "I'm a reporter." And they said, "Oh, no, you can't go." But just because I had suspenders on and a tie and I looked like I might know what I'm doing, it was, the skids are open, go ahead and get in. And so that's part of what I think a value of what you're trying to do here.
Absolutely.
Access is important, and we like to get places. And the other side of that access thing, Murphy, that some agencies take advantage of is I'll show up with a TV camera, and they will say, "Oh, no, you need to go over here in this bullpen. That's the only place you can go." And yet all the people that are from the public are there. Well, they've got their cell phones.
That's right.
And those are cameras. But because I have a TV camera that's a bigger camera that shows up on somebody's shoulders, I'm getting segregated, and I will point out to people that, wait a minute, they've got a camera.
Yep.
I can be here.
Yep.
Or make them leave.
What does that look like? How has technology changed the game for you as a reporter? I can imagine not only is that frustrating, but, if everybody there has a camera, is there a process now are those people sending you all clips? Like how does that work?
Well, just think about how the world has changed, right? We've all seen incidents on airplanes. United Airlines
That's
had a
right.
big crisis management because an issue happened. And, what's the first thing people do right now when they see it?
Take out their phone.
Grab their phone.
That's right.
So it's not, I saw this, it's, here it is. And
Yeah.
you can't, the camera doesn't lie.
That's right.
So it has
Today it
changed
does lie,
everything.
by the way, with AI. But
Yes, yeah, right. Generally speaking, how about that? But it has changed. Anytime there's a major news story, some of the best stuff that comes out is people that are right there, right away. And God bless TMZ. They do a great job of finding a way to get some of those videos. Sometimes they end up at the local stations or with the network. But, it's a different world because now we have proof. And I think, even back to what you did as manager of safety, the tool that body-worn cameras have become.
That's right.
And at first, some law enforcement officers said, well, oh my gosh, it's a problem. It's
I hate them, was the first thing they said.
But how much money did it save cities, municipalities from people walking in and saying, Officer A beat me up Officer B spit on me and whatever, and I want to check, and I'm writing a letter, and some people just got checks because they made the claim and it was easier to make them go away.
That's right.
But now it's okay. When did it happen? Let's look at the camera.
Well, and it's funny you say that because body-worn cameras, when I first had to roll them out in the city of Denver, I'll never forget the letters and emails I got from officers saying, I can't believe you don't trust us. This is, all these things. And this is in the midst of George Floyd, a time that was really difficult for all of us. And frankly, Denver PD had body cams before that. Denver Sheriff was rolling them in slowly. So we just made sure everybody could have them, and then we had to meet state law. The interesting thing today is if you go and look at any of those officers or you talk to any of those officers, they'll be like, it's one of the best tools because it proves that I'm doing my job well. And you don't see any officer complain about body cams today because it actually helps them prove that they're doing their job properly. And frankly, if they weren't, we want those people out.
And it might neutralize those bad guys who might do something.
That's right.
That it becomes a he said, she said because of what's going on there. And increase safety, all those elements of it. So
that's right.
The cell phone, our world is different today.
That's right. Tony, I need you to give me a story. Everybody, for those out of state who don't know Tony, I encourage you to go on YouTube or whatever channel you get your information and look up Tony, and you're going to see there's a famous thing that he does. If you don't call him back, if you don't respond to him after months of trying to get a hold of you, he will come find you. And I want you to talk about that and give us an anecdote or a story about one of those most interesting times.
It's one of the tools we have in our toolbox.
Sure.
But if a story rises to a certain level, I let you know, Murphy Robinson, you have two options. Option A is we're going to sit down like this in a professional setting.
That's right.
And I'm going to ask you questions. You got a week to schedule it. And give me 15 minutes of your time, and here's the topic. And you're going to shape the story because your answers will help me decide what is true and what is not true. But if you don't want option A, Mr. Robinson, option B is I'm going to show up at some public place and I'm just going to start asking questions. And you know what that looks like.
Oh, yes, I do.
And
yes, I do.
so,
thank God you never had to do that to me.
No, I didn't.
Thank God.
But my point here is people make that choice, and then someone will go, well, that's ambush journalism.
Yeah.
And if you look up the definition of ambush, and I've said this a million times, look up the definition of ambush. It's an unexpected occurrence. If I call you up and say, hey, I'm now going to do option B because you said no, it's no longer unexpected. Get ready.
That's right.
Get your answers ready.
That's right.
But it's not an ambush. I'm just going to do the interview because if we don't do these interviews when stories are at that level,
that's right,
then everybody's going to say, no, I don't want to sit down with Tony.
That's right.
I don't want to sit down with people like John Ferrugia. That's intimidating.
John Ferrugia, one of my favorite guys.
Good friend of mine.
I love John.
Yes. But so you don't get to decide if this is a story or not. I've already made that decision. And if you want it to happen, it will. And if some of the ones that people point to the most are the ones we did at Pebble Beach one time when the head of Pinnacle Assurance, and then we got an insider tip that said there was a boondoggle, and it was a governor-appointed board, and they went to Pebble Beach for several days and played golf and had
So you went to Pebble Beach.
So we happened to show up at Pebble Beach, and we were on the 18th, and things got a little bit sideways, and he wasn't happy I was there, but that interview cost him a $180,000 bonus, and a few months later it cost him his job.
Let me ask you the most important question. Did you get to play 18 while you were out there?
I didn't get to play, but we did follow them on the golf course because it's public. And the interview was actually under the famous tree at the 18th hole.
Oh, my goodness.
So, when I watch the tournaments there's always a memory.
That is something else. That is really something. But I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, you hear these anecdotes and these stories from our well-renowned, reporter. This is, to me, one of the things that makes democracy unique. The ability to call out, hold accountable those who do have authority. One of the reasons I kind of really appreciate the media, because without that check and without that balance, we're kind of in a really bad place because, not everyone that is doing all the thousands of jobs out there is doing things for the right reason. And sometimes, you make a decision that can steer you down a path that that will have repercussions and continual bad decisions. But it's jobs like this, but whether you're an investigative reporter or even just, the person that takes out their phone to record something that they're not sure is quite correct, that's accountability. And that accountability is one of the most important pieces of our democracy.
I couldn't agree more. And it to your law enforcement background, right? If we didn't have police officers on the highways every once in a while that might write us a ticket, how fast do you think I would have driven to get here?
That's right.
Right? If there weren't investigative journalists out there that might show up to ask you a question, what would people in power, people in control of large sums of money, what would they do? Right? So just the possibility of getting that journalistic speeding ticket, if you will, I think some people instinctively would never do that, right?
Yeah.
But there is a portion of our world that when you see opportunity, you try to benefit yourself.
That's right.
And if it's not ethical, if it's not just, if it's not sincere, then that's when I get the phone calls.
That's right. That's right. Tony, what does the media look like? And not just legacy media, but I'm talking YouTube, I'm talking all the things that aren't invented yet. What does that look like in 20 to 30 years? I love these questions when I go out with my daughters and their significant others. I love having discussions about how life has changed. And your kids are in the business, correct?
My daughter is now the senior investigative reporter at Denver 7.
Wow.
Very proud.
That's
Great
awesome.
reporter. I like to tell people at least one Kovaleski has journalistic talent.
There you go.
Right?
There you go.
You look back. I remember when I went to my aunt's house and she had a microwave oven. Well, it's not considered anything new and special now. It's guaranteed. The iPhone right now compared to what was out in the 90s when we had it in the flip phone to the brick or all of that. And now we have a computer and how that. So how are things going to change? I've got 3 grandchildren now, a 4th one on the way in a month.
Congrats.
And I think about, just like you're asking, what's it going to be like in 30 years? Or when you watch old TV and people pick up one of the phones that's plugged into the wall, right? Are they going to watch TV from now 30 years and go, oh, that was a cell phone. Well, now I've got it right here in my temple, and I just pull on my ear and you call. I mean, what's it going to be like? So, I think I believe in journalism. And people have said to me, well, why would you let your daughter go into journalism? It's all changed. And I said, we all have an appetite for information.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably even greater now, Murphy, than it was before because we get it so quickly on our cell phone.
That's right.
Where when I was growing up, my parents had to wait for the 6 o'clock news to find out what happened in the world.
That's right.
Going back even further, Edward R. Murrow would sometimes do war reports that didn't air for like a week until they got back and were flown back, and you know,
wow,
that delay, right? And now it's instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we go in 30 years? It's a great question. I'm anxious to watch the evolution. I hope it gets back to what you asked earlier about trust
mm-hmm.
and verify,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you're getting information from places that are viewed not only by you but by the greater population.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we get to a place where this works out a little bit right now because
mm-hmm.
it is so polarizing. And people right now go to that news source that thinks like they want to think.
That's right.
Right.
The algorithm.
Right. And
you know.
and it, if you're a hardcore Republican, you're tuning into Fox News. If you're a hardcore Democrat, you're tuning into MSNBC. And you're getting messages and spin. And my significant other will watch both at night. And I'll turn it off and I'll go, so where's the truth?
That's right.
We heard this on this side. I just want to know where the truth
mm-hmm.
is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the war that's going on in Iran right now and the spin on both sides. And I just give me the truth, gosh darn it.
I call that the algorithmic depreciation of the brain.
Oh, I like that.
Our brains are depreciating more and more by the algorithms that we're helping build to tell us what we want to hear instead of telling us the truth. And we have to figure out how to work with these companies that we're getting this information from to stop giving us things that are fake news. And I
Mhm.
don't say that in a political sense, but fake news is absolutely
Well,
real at this point.
whether you like Trump or not,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm an unaffiliated voter, so I voted both sides of the aisle. I
Yeah,
can tell you
likewise.
that, right? I
Mm-hmm.
vote for leadership first,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes my decision has been very difficult in recent years, right?
Yeah.
But um, what the president has said about network media, you can watch and you can see that unfortunately there's not as much balance as you'd like.
Yeah.
And do I think it's great he called them out with a fake news thing? No, because I had people actually say that to me. That matriculated down to local, and then
Absolutely.
I actually had people say, I won't do an interview with you because you're fake news.
Mm.
And I was like, where's that coming from? Explain why you, because I'll justify what I do all day long.
Mm-hmm.
So it's impacted credibility.
Mm.
Some of it was worthwhile. I think that sometimes we all need to look in the mirror and go, am I being fair and balanced? Because that's what people want ultimately, right?
Yes.
And then let you make your decision,
Absolutely.
right? It's like that political debate. And I have family right now where in California, where if you go to family events, there's some hardcore Republicans, there's hardcore Democrats, and the rule is you can't bring up politics because
Good.
it gets ugly.
Yeah.
And that makes me sad because I think you have a right to your political opinion and
That's
your
right.
vote just like I do.
And we should be able to share a meal together.
And I
right?
want to hear why you're voting the way you do.
That's right.
And you educate me. And I go, okay, I get that.
That's right.
And here's why I vote the way I do. And it's okay that we don't agree.
That's right.
Discourse is beautiful if it's a learning environment.
That's right. That's right. We got to get back to that. What are your parting words for parting, meaning ending out of this podcast, for anyone who wants to get into journalism, who's been thinking about it, or frankly, even just has a YouTube channel and wants to start getting more news out there? What would you say to those folks that want to get into your field?
No, always stay curious. Back to my snare drum
Mm-hmm.
story, right? Look at the story that came out of Minneapolis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Minnesota with all that corruption. It was exposed by a YouTube journalist. The guy is 23, 24 years old,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
hats off to what he did because that
Absolutely.
that was accountability. Ask questions, look, understand the system, get to know how government works and how you can get together to get information to bring things to light because the more things that come to light, the more graft, corruption, the more holding government and leadership accountable, the better off we are as a society.
That's
So,
right.
if you have that insatiable curiosity, if you want to make a difference, I'll tell you, Murphy, my job every day I went to work, I enjoyed it.
Mm,
Everything was different. I wasn't making the same widget every day, and
mhm,
it's okay for those to do. It just wasn't my thing. But
mhm,
to have a job where you look forward to going to work for 40 plus years,
mhm.
and you get this incredible trust from people that say, "Can you help me fix something?" I got paid well, but the biggest paycheck was to bring the kind of change that we did at DIA by putting 2 ambulances out there because we brought something to light that needed to be brought to
That's
light,
right.
and you said you were at my retirement event.
That's right.
The amazing widow of a man who died because an ambulance didn't get there in enough time, um, she's become a lifelong friend because she was willing to step forward and do the right thing.
Wow.
And people's lives out at DIA are saved every month,
Mhm.
and they have no idea. A widow and a heroic paramedic said this can't keep happening.
Yeah.
And credit to Mayor John Hickenlooper at the time for
And
making that change too.
but also because a heroic reporter said yes to the
Well,
case. So thank
that's
you.
that's kind, but it
Oh,
so if you're looking to do this job, it's an
mhm.
incredible career. It's very satisfying, and our country and our state and our community need it.
Well, on behalf of all Coloradans, Tony, thank you for your service and thank you for what you've done for this amazing state. And looking forward to seeing what's in the next chapter.
A pleasure, my friend. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks, brother. Absolutely. That's Murphy's Law, everybody.